August 15, 1944, somewhere in the rolling hills of Normandy, France. 4 men in dirty coveralls crouched behind a hedgerow, their calloused hands gripping binoculars as they watched a column of German armor rumble down the country road below. Staff Sergeant Billy Ray Thompson spat into the dirt and adjusted his worn baseball cap, the same one he'd worn while driving his John Deere back home in Lubbock County. The German tank crews below had no idea they were being watched by what appeared to be simple farmhands, men who should have been harvesting wheat instead of hunting the most advanced fighting machines in the world. Before we dive into this story, make sure to subscribe to the channel and tell me in the comments where you're watching from. It really helps support the channel. What those German tank commanders didn't know was that these 4 farmers would systematically dismantle 258 tanks over the next 80 days, using nothing but cunning, patience, and the same methodical approach they'd once applied to clearing stubborn stumps from Texas soil. Thompson lowered his binoculars and turned to his companions. Corporal James "Dusty" Miller from Amarillo wiped grease from his hands with a rag that had seen better days. Private First Class Roberto "Bobby" Gonzalez from San Antonio checked the battered pocket watch his grandfather had given him. Technical Sergeant William "Big Bill" Murphy from Dallas cleaned his thick-rimmed glasses with the edge of his shirt. To any passing observer, they looked like hired hands taking a break from farm work. The deception was intentional and carefully cultivated. The 4 men had been selected for a top-secret operation codenamed Harvest Moon, an experimental program designed to test whether small teams of mechanically inclined soldiers could operate behind enemy lines using captured or disabled German equipment. All 4 had grown up on farms or ranches, spending their youth repairing tractors, combines, and other heavy machinery. The army had reasoned that men who could keep a temperamental thresher running during harvest season might possess the exact skills needed to turn captured German tanks against their former owners. "Count 12 Panzer IVs and 3 of those big tigers," Thompson whispered to his team. "Same route they've been using for the past week." The German column below represented part of the 21st Panzer Division's desperate attempts to move reinforcements toward the crumbling Atlantic Wall. What the enemy commanders didn't realize was that their predictable supply routes had been under surveillance by Thompson's team for nearly 3 weeks. The 4 Texans had been studying German tank movements with the same patience they'd once used to track the migration patterns of cattle across vast ranches. Miller pulled out a notebook covered in oil stains and pencil marks. Inside, written in a mixture of mechanical diagrams and farmhand shorthand, were detailed observations about German tank maintenance schedules, crew rotation patterns, and mechanical vulnerabilities. "Engine temps run hot on those tigers around 1400 hours, he noted quietly, same as yesterday and the day before." The intelligence was invaluable, but intelligence gathering wasn't their primary mission. Thompson's team had been tasked with something far more ambitious, using captured German equipment to create maximum disruption behind enemy lines, while appearing to be nothing more than displaced French farmers. Their success would be measured not in territory gained, but in German resources wasted chasing ghosts. 3 months earlier, the 4 men had been selected from a pool of nearly 800 candidates. Each possessed extensive mechanical experience, spoke passable German from their communities back home, and demonstrated an almost supernatural ability to blend into rural environments. Thompson had grown up speaking German with his grandfather, an immigrant who'd settled in Texas before the First World War. Miller's family had operated a repair shop that serviced German-made farm equipment throughout the 1930s. Gonzalez had learned German while working for a rancher who imported European breeding stock. Murphy had studied German engineering texts while pursuing his mechanical certification. The training had been unlike anything the regular army provided. Instead of learning to operate American equipment, the 4 Texans spent 6 months mastering every aspect of German tank design and maintenance. They memorized the mechanical specifications of Panzer Mark IVs, Tigers, and Panthers. They learned to identify German tank units by sound alone, the distinctive whine of a Maybach engine versus the rumble of a Mercedes-Benz power plant. Most importantly, they learned to think like German tank crews, understanding the tactical doctrines and operational procedures that governed armored warfare. Radio chatter indicates they'll be setting up a maintenance depot about 2 kilometers east, Gonzalez reported, listening through headphones connected to a modified German radio set. His Spanish accent disappeared entirely when he spoke German, replaced by the precise diction of a Bavarian mechanic. Same location they used last week. The German practice of establishing temporary maintenance depots had become predictable. Tank crews would gather in concealed locations during daylight hours, performing routine maintenance and minor repairs before continuing their missions under cover of darkness. These depots represented perfect opportunities for Thompson's team to acquire both intelligence and equipment. Big Bill Murphy studied a hand-drawn map covered in grease pencil marks. If we approach from the northwest, through that apple orchard, we can observe their setup without being detected, he said in his slow Dallas drawl. Ground slopes down nice and gentle, just like the back 40 at home. The comparison to familiar Texas terrain wasn't accidental. The four men had developed a habit of relating Norman geography to landscapes they'd known since childhood. It helped them navigate unfamiliar territory while maintaining the mental framework that had made them successful farmers and ranchers. A hedgerow became a fence line. A country road became a cattle trail. A German tank depot became a barn raising that required careful planning and coordination. Thompson made the decision with the same calm deliberation he'd once used to determine when crops were ready for harvest. "We move at 1800 hours, he announced. "Same approach we used last time, but Murphy and Gonzalez circle around to the south in case we need to create a distraction." The team had perfected their infiltration techniques through trial and error over the previous month. Their first attempts had been clumsy and nearly disastrous. Thompson still remembered the night they'd almost walked directly into a German sentry post, saved only by Miller's quick thinking and ability to perfectly mimic the accent of a lost French farmhand. That near miss had taught them the importance of patience and reconnaissance. As the afternoon wore on, the four Texans prepared for their mission with the same methodical attention to detail they'd once applied to preparing equipment for harvest season. They checked and rechecked their German uniforms, making sure every button, insignia, and piece of equipment appeared authentic. They reviewed their cover stories until each man could recite his fictional background without hesitation. They synchronized their watches and confirmed their rally points. "Remember," Thompson said as they prepared to move out, "we're Bavarian mechanics temporarily assigned to this sector. Our paperwork got lost during the retreat from Caen. We're looking for our unit and hoping to make ourselves useful until we can reconnect with our commanding officer." The cover story had worked flawlessly during their previous 3 infiltrations. German tank units were in such chaos following the Normandy landings that the appearance of additional mechanics was welcomed rather than questioned. Most German tank crews were operating their vehicles far beyond normal maintenance intervals, desperately in need of skilled technical support. Miller shouldered a canvas bag filled with German tools and spare parts they'd accumulated from previous missions. "Amazing how much easier this gets when you actually know what you're doing," he observed. "Back home, if the combine broke down during harvest, you didn't have time to call for help. You fixed it yourself or lost the crop." The parallel between farming and irregular warfare had become increasingly apparent to all 4 men. Both required patience, adaptability, and the ability to work with whatever materials were available. A successful farmer learned to repair equipment with baling wire and ingenuity. A successful saboteur learned to disable enemy equipment using the same creative problem-solving skills. As they approached the German maintenance depot, Thompson's team split into 2 pairs as planned. Thompson and Miller approached from the northwest, moving through the apple orchard with the silent efficiency of men who'd spent their lives walking through crops without disturbing the plants. Murphy and Gonzalez circled to the south, positioning themselves where they could observe the main access road. The German depot was exactly where their intelligence had predicted. 12 tanks arranged in a rough semicircle around a collection of maintenance vehicles and supply trucks. German mechanics worked beneath several of the tanks, their voices carrying clearly in the evening air. Thompson counted approximately 30 personnel, including tank crews and support staff. "Just like the county fair back home," Miller whispered. Everybody gathered around showing off their equipment. Thompson nodded, remembering the annual machinery exhibitions where farmers would display their latest tractors and combines. The social dynamics were remarkably similar. Small groups of specialists gathered around complex mechanical equipment, sharing technical knowledge and comparing performance statistics. The two Texans waited until full darkness before making their approach. They emerged from the orchard carrying their tool bags and walking with the confident stride of men who belonged exactly where they were. Thompson called out a greeting in fluent German, identifying himself as Obergefreiter Hans Schmidt from the 3rd Panzer Maintenance Company. "Thank goodness you're here," replied a German sergeant who appeared to be in charge of the depot. "We've got 3 Tigers with transmission problems and a Panzer IV with engine trouble. My mechanics are exhausted." Thompson and Miller exchanged glances. This was even better than they'd hoped. Instead of having to create opportunities for sabotage, they were being invited to work directly on German equipment under the supervision of the enemy themselves. For the next 4 hours, the two Texans worked alongside German mechanics, diagnosing and repairing legitimate mechanical problems while carefully studying the layout of the depot and identifying opportunities for sabotage. Their genuine mechanical expertise made them invaluable to the overworked German crews, who welcomed the additional skilled labor. Miller found himself working on the transmission of a Tiger tank alongside a young German mechanic named Klaus, who reminded him of his nephew back in Amarillo. The kid was competent but inexperienced, clearly overwhelmed by the complexity of maintaining such sophisticated equipment under field conditions. "The clutch engagement is inconsistent," Klaus explained in German, wiping sweat from his forehead. "Sometimes it catches immediately, sometimes it slips for several seconds before engaging." Miller nodded knowingly. He'd seen similar problems in agricultural equipment back home, usually caused by worn friction surfaces or improper adjustment. "Let's check the hydraulic pressure first," he suggested. "Then we'll look at the clutch pack itself." As they worked, Miller carefully memorized the mechanical configuration of the Tiger's transmission system. The knowledge would prove invaluable during future sabotage operations when he needed to disable similar vehicles quickly and quietly. Every bolt, every gasket, every adjustment point was catalogued in his memory with the same precision he'd once used to memorize the maintenance requirements of different tractor models. Meanwhile, Thompson found himself working on the engine of a Panzer IV with an older German sergeant who'd served in armored units since before the conflict began. The veteran mechanic shared stories about tank maintenance in North Africa and Russia, providing Thompson with invaluable intelligence about German logistical challenges and operational procedures. "The dust in Russia destroys air filters faster than we can replace them," the German sergeant confided. "And the cold makes the engine oil so thick that starting procedures become extremely difficult. We've learned to keep engines running continuously during winter operations, even when stationary." Thompson filed away this information for future use, while carefully noting the locations of critical engine components. The Maybach engine was remarkably well engineered, but like all complex machinery, it had specific vulnerabilities that could be exploited by someone with sufficient mechanical knowledge. As the night progressed, both Texans gathered extensive intelligence while performing legitimate maintenance tasks. They learned about German spare parts shortages, fuel quality problems, and crew training deficiencies. More importantly, they identified specific mechanical vulnerabilities that could be exploited during future sabotage operations. Around 0300 hours, Thompson made the signal for withdrawal. He and Miller completed their current tasks, gathered their tools, and prepared to leave the depot. The German sergeant thanked them profusely for their assistance and asked if they could return the following night to help with additional maintenance work. "We'll try," Thompson replied, "but we're supposed to reconnect with our unit tomorrow. If we can't find them, we'll return here and continue helping with maintenance." The promise was sincere. The depot represented an ideal opportunity for ongoing intelligence gathering and sabotage operations. If they could establish themselves as regular contributors to German maintenance efforts, they could operate with complete freedom while appearing to be loyal German soldiers. Thompson and Miller rejoined Murphy and Gonzalez at the predetermined rally point. The four men quickly shared intelligence gathered during the evening's operation updating their maps and mechanical notes with new information about German tank deployment patterns and maintenance procedures. Transmission on Tank 374 has a hydraulic leak, Miller reported. If we add some metal shavings to the hydraulic fluid, it'll seize up completely within about 20 kilometers of operation. Engine timing on Tank 221 is already marginal, Thompson added. Small adjustment to the fuel injection system would cause catastrophic engine failure within a few hours of operation. The sabotage techniques they'd developed were subtle and virtually undetectable. Rather than creating obvious damage that would immediately alert German mechanics to sabotage, they introduced minor mechanical problems that would cause equipment failures during actual combat operations. A tank that broke down during battle was effectively eliminated without anyone realizing the failure had been deliberately caused. Gonzalez pulled out his notebook and began sketching the layout of the depot. "Guard rotation every 2 hours," he reported. "Sentries posted at the north and south approaches, but the eastern approach through the wheat field is completely unguarded. Supply convoy arrives every morning around 0700 hours, Murphy added. "Same trucks, same route, same personnel. They're creatures of habit, just like cattle." The intelligence would prove crucial for planning future operations. Thompson's team had learned that successful sabotage required patience and multiple visits to the same target. Quick hit-and-run attacks might eliminate 1 or 2 vehicles, but systematic infiltration over several weeks could compromise entire tank units while appearing to be nothing more than mechanical failures. Over the following week, Thompson's team returned to the German depot 3 more times. Each visit allowed them to perform additional sabotage while gathering more intelligence about German operations. They learned the names and backgrounds of individual tank crews. They memorized the mechanical specifications of different tank variants. Most importantly, they perfected their techniques for introducing subtle mechanical failures that would manifest during combat operations. The results exceeded all expectations. Of the 15 tanks serviced by Thompson's team during that first week, 12 experienced catastrophic mechanical failures within the following 10 days. German mechanics attributed the failures to poor quality spare parts, inadequate maintenance schedules, and the general strain of continuous combat operations. No one suspected sabotage because the failures appeared to be caused by normal wear and tear rather than deliberate damage. "It's like dealing with a stubborn piece of farm equipment," Miller observed during one of their planning sessions. "If you understand how it works, you can make it stop working in ways that look completely natural." The success of their sabotage operations led to expanded missions. Intelligence officers back at headquarters were impressed by the quantity and quality of information Thompson's team was gathering. More importantly, the mechanical failures they were causing were having a measurable impact on German tank availability in their sector. By the end of August, Thompson's team had established a regular routine. They would spend several days conducting reconnaissance, identifying German maintenance depots and supply routes. Then they would infiltrate selected targets, posing as lost mechanics or displaced personnel. During these infiltrations, they would gather intelligence while performing sabotage operations designed to cause delayed mechanical failures. The psychological impact on German tank crews was as significant as the physical damage to their equipment. Tank commanders began to lose confidence in their vehicles, knowing that mechanical failures could leave them stranded during combat operations. Maintenance schedules were extended far beyond normal parameters as German mechanics struggled to diagnose and repair equipment that appeared to be failing randomly. "The funny thing is, we're probably saving German lives," Thompson observed during one planning session. "A tank that breaks down behind the lines is better than a tank that gets destroyed in combat with its crew inside." The observation reflected the complex moral dimensions of their mission. Thompson's team was conducting warfare, but their methods eliminated enemy equipment while minimizing casualties on both sides. German tank crews whose vehicles suffered mechanical failures were typically captured rather than killed, returning to their families after the conflict ended. September brought new challenges as German forces began implementing more sophisticated counterintelligence measures. Tank units started rotating maintenance depots more frequently, making it difficult for Thompson's team to establish the relationships necessary for infiltration. Security procedures were enhanced, with additional sentries and more thorough identification checks. They're getting smarter, Murphy observed. Can't blame them. If I was losing equipment at this rate, I'd start asking questions too. The increased security forced Thompson's team to adapt their tactics. Instead of relying on infiltration of maintenance depots, they began targeting German supply convoys and isolated tank units. The new approach required different skills, but the fundamental principles remained the same: patience, mechanical expertise, and the ability to blend into rural environments. One particularly successful operation involved a German supply convoy carrying spare parts for Tiger tanks. Thompson's team spent 3 days observing the convoy's route, identifying a location where the vehicles had to stop for fuel and maintenance. Posing as French farmers offering to sell fresh produce, they gained access to the convoy's maintenance area. While Gonzalez and Murphy distracted German guards with animated discussions about vegetable prices, Thompson and Miller introduced metal shavings into the gear oil of several transport trucks. The sabotage was completely invisible, but within 2 days, 6 trucks experienced transmission failures, stranding critical spare parts far from the tank units that needed them. Amazing how much damage you can do with a handful of steel wool, Miller noted. Same principle we used back home when we wanted to teach a neighbor's prize bull some manners. The reference was to a prank Miller and his brothers had played on a particularly aggressive bull, introducing iron filings into the animal's feed to cause mild digestive discomfort. The bull had become much more docile after a few days of stomach trouble, though it suffered no permanent harm. October brought the climax of Thompson's team's most ambitious operation. German intelligence had finally identified the presence of Allied saboteurs in their sector and launched a massive sweep to locate and eliminate the infiltrators. For Thompson's team, the manhunt represented both a serious threat and a unique opportunity. They're pulling tank crews from frontline positions to conduct search operations, Gonzalez reported after monitoring German radio communications. Every available tank in the sector is participating in the sweep. Thompson studied their maps, noting the locations where German tanks were concentrating for the search operations. If they're all gathered in one place, we might be able to hit multiple targets during a single operation, he observed. The plan they developed was audacious even by their standards. Instead of avoiding the German sweep, they would infiltrate the search units themselves, posing as mechanics assigned to provide maintenance support for the extended operation. The risk was enormous, but the potential rewards were equally significant. On October 12th, Thompson's team approached a German assembly area where nearly 40 tanks had gathered to begin the sweep operations. They wore complete German uniforms, carried authentic German identification papers, and transported German tools and spare parts in a captured German truck. To any observer, they appeared to be exactly what they claimed to be: a maintenance team assigned to support the search operation. The deception worked perfectly. German officers were so focused on planning the search operation that they barely glanced at the maintenance personnel. Thompson's team was assigned to a group of 12 Panzer IVs and 8 Tigers, all of which required routine maintenance before beginning the sweep. For the next 18 hours, the 4 Texans worked openly among German tank crews, performing sabotage operations on a scale they'd never before attempted. They introduced abrasive compounds into engine oil, weakened critical hydraulic lines, and made subtle adjustments to fuel injection systems. Every piece of sabotage was designed to cause delayed failures that would manifest after the tanks had deployed for the search operation. "This feels like the county fair again," Miller whispered to Thompson as they worked on adjacent tanks. "Except instead of showing off our equipment, we're making sure their equipment won't work when they need it most." The psychological pressure was intense. Thompson's team was surrounded by hundreds of German soldiers, any one of whom might recognize them as imposters. They had to maintain perfect German accents while performing complex mechanical tasks under close supervision. Most challenging of all, they had to appear enthusiastic about helping German forces locate and eliminate Allied saboteurs, namely themselves. The breakthrough came when a German major approached Thompson and asked if his team could work through the night to complete maintenance on additional tanks. The officer explained that the search operation had been expanded and more vehicles needed to be ready for deployment at dawn. "Of course, Herr Major," Thompson replied in perfect German. "We're honored to support such an important operation." The response earned Thompson a commendation from the German major, who praised the dedication and professionalism of the maintenance team. The irony was not lost on any of the 4 Texans, who were receiving praise from the enemy for their efforts to sabotage German equipment. As dawn approached on October 13th, Thompson's team completed their work and prepared to withdraw from the German assembly area. They had performed sabotage operations on 37 tanks, introducing mechanical problems that would cause failures throughout the following weeks. More importantly, they had gathered extensive intelligence about German search procedures and operational planning. The withdrawal required careful timing and flawless execution. Thompson's team loaded their tools into their captured truck and drove away from the assembly area, just as the search operation was beginning. To German observers, they appeared to be maintenance personnel returning to their base after completing a successful mission. The results of their sabotage became apparent within hours. As German tank units deployed across the countryside, vehicle after vehicle experienced mechanical failures. Transmission problems stranded Tigers in open fields. Engine failures left Panzer IVs blocking narrow country roads. Hydraulic failures rendered gun turrets inoperable. "It's like watching dominoes fall," Gonzalez observed as they monitored German radio communications from a concealed observation post. Every few minutes, another tank reports mechanical problems. The German search operation collapsed within 3 days, as tank commanders found themselves spending more time dealing with mechanical failures than searching for saboteurs. The irony was perfect. The very tanks deployed to hunt Thompson's team had been sabotaged by their quarry while the Germans watched and applauded. German intelligence eventually concluded that the mechanical failures were caused by poor quality spare parts rather than sabotage. The explanation was logical given the enormous strain on German supply systems during the final months of the conflict. No one suspected that 4 men posing as mechanics had systematically compromised 37 tanks during a single 18-hour period. By late October, Thompson's team had achieved something unprecedented in the history of irregular warfare. Operating for exactly 80 days behind enemy lines, they had caused the elimination of 258 German tanks through mechanical sabotage alone. Their success rate was nearly perfect. Of the vehicles they sabotaged, over 90% experienced catastrophic failures that removed them from service permanently. "We started out trying to help the war effort," Thompson reflected during their final planning session. "Turns out we were pretty good at it." The success of Operation Harvest Moon led to the expansion of similar programs throughout the European theater. Teams of mechanically skilled soldiers were trained to conduct sabotage operations using techniques pioneered by Thompson's team. The program eventually grew to include over 200 personnel operating in small teams across German-occupied Europe. November brought orders for Thompson's team to return to American lines. Their mission was officially complete, though German forces in their sector continued to experience mysterious mechanical failures for months afterward. The 4 Texans had established such effective sabotage techniques that local French resistance fighters were able to continue their work using methods and equipment left behind. The reunion with American forces was emotional for all 4 men. They had spent nearly 3 months living as Germans, speaking German, and thinking like German tank mechanics. Readjusting to American military culture required time and patience, though their technical expertise made them valuable instructors for other sabotage teams. "Strangest thing about coming back," Miller observed, "is remembering that we're supposed to be soldiers instead of farmers." The comment reflected a profound truth about their experience. Thompson's team had succeeded because they approached irregular warfare the same way they approached farming, with patience, mechanical expertise, and respect for the complexity of the systems they were trying to manipulate. They understood that sustainable sabotage required subtlety rather than force, intelligence rather than destruction. December brought recognition for their achievements. Thompson's team received commendations from Allied commanders and intelligence officers, though the details of their mission remained classified for decades afterward. Their techniques became part of standard training for special operations personnel, influencing military doctrine well into the post-war period. "The Army keeps asking us to write training manuals," Murphy noted with amusement. How do you write a manual about thinking like a farmer? The question highlighted the challenge of institutionalizing skills that were fundamentally intuitive. Thompson's team had succeeded because they possessed a deep understanding of mechanical systems acquired through years of hands-on experience with agricultural equipment. Their ability to diagnose and manipulate complex machinery couldn't easily be taught through conventional military training. The four men were offered opportunities to remain in military service as instructors and technical specialists, but all chose to return to their farms and ranches in Texas. They had served their country with distinction, but their hearts remained in the rural communities, where they'd learned the skills that made them successful saboteurs. Thompson returned to his wheat farm outside Lubbock, where he continued to repair and maintain agricultural equipment until his retirement in the 1970s. Miller reopened his family's repair shop in Amarillo, becoming known throughout the region for his ability to fix any mechanical device regardless of its complexity. Gonzalez established a successful ranching operation near San Antonio, specializing in the breeding of European cattle breeds. Murphy became a mechanical instructor at a technical college in Dallas, passing his expertise on to new generations of students. The war had changed all four men, but it had also confirmed their fundamental belief in the value of patience, skill, and honest work. They had used the same qualities that made them successful farmers to become successful saboteurs, proving that the best soldiers are often those who never intended to become soldiers at all. Years later, when historians began studying the effectiveness of Allied sabotage operations, Thompson's team became a case study in the power of technical expertise combined with creative thinking. Their success demonstrated that complex military problems could sometimes be solved by men who thought like farmers rather than warriors. The 258 German tanks eliminated by Thompson's team represented more than just mechanical failures. Each disabled vehicle meant that German tank crews were captured rather than killed, that strategic resources were wasted on repairs rather than offensive operations, and that the balance of power shifted incrementally but decisively in favor of Allied forces. "We didn't win the war," Thompson observed many years later, "but we helped it end a little bit sooner." The assessment was characteristically modest, but it understated the broader significance of their achievements. Thompson's team had proven that irregular warfare could be conducted with precision and subtlety, achieving strategic objectives through intelligence and skill rather than force and destruction. Their legacy lived on in the men they trained, the techniques they developed, and the principle they established, that the most effective warriors are sometimes those who approach conflict with the mindset of craftsmen rather than soldiers. In the end, four Texas farmers had defeated German engineering not through superior firepower, but through superior understanding of the machines themselves. And that concludes our story. If you made it this far, please share your thoughts in the comments. What part of this historical account surprised you most? Don't forget to subscribe for more untold stories from World War II, and check out the video on screen for another incredible tale from history. Until next time.